Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the School of PE's podcast. I'm Chris Miller, and today I got Mr. Obi Efochie, a PE out of Texas. So let's give him a warm welcome. And Obi, if you can kind of just introduce yourself to the audience, we'll get started with today's topic.
Yeah, so my name is Obi Efochie. I've been professional engineer for about 3 years now. Went to undergrad at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas, and really enjoy civil engineering.
Sounds good. Well, welcome aboard. It's kind of interesting. Today's topic, I saw it, and then I saw that you're from Texas. Like, well, the heck, these topics don't go together, but they do. So today we are going to talk about cold weather induced power outage in the state of Texas. So I know that I think it was last year they had a pretty big outage, and when I think of Texas, I don't really think of cold weather. I've driven through Amarillo in the winter, and it was a little bit cold, but overall, I think of Texas as hot and humid.
It's going to be
So
78 tomorrow. So
78, and I'm sitting here in Ohio at 29. Obi, we're not off to a great start here, buddy. We're about 50 degrees different here. So it looks like you were in Texas during these outages.
yes, I was. I actually lived in downtown essentially when the outage hit, and luckily I didn't lose any power. Had power the entire time. Had hot water, so I was like a safe haven for a few friends and family.
Very nice. Yeah, it's funny as well, it's not well, kind of funny in the sense that, when I think of power outages, I might be without power for an hour or so, and
Yeah,
I'm miserable. I mean, no internet, no nothing. You're hoping that you charged your phone. So I can only imagine what people went through during these power outages because they were lengthy.
yeah,
And they happened at the wrong time of year. It was cold for sure, so which makes it even worse. I mean, you're looking at no hot water, no power overall. Um, can you kind of talk a little bit about your experience during this time? You were lucky enough and you were nice that you were able to provide a safe haven for friends and family. So if you can kind of just walk us through your experience, we'll kind of go from there.
yeah. So storm came in. You have a lot of warnings, so you don't think much of them when they come. But this one came. It was enough snow and ice to knock out power for a lot of Texas. And I live about a mile from work, so I walked to the office that morning.
Oof.
Uh, Very cold. Roads were too bad to drive. So walked there. The building had no power, so there was no one there. Doors didn't open. Elevators weren't working. So I went back home. Maybe 2 days later, they're like, "Hey guys, don't come to work. Power's out." I'm like, "Okay, thanks." So they updated 2 days later. But I don't know if I was on a hospital grid or something, but just my building had power. Everyone else around us didn't have power. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know how the grid works exactly, but they alternate buildings or something. But interesting.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, fortunately, that you were lucky enough to maintain that power. Um, it's interesting, like, when you experience like a tornado or a hurricane, you at least have some kind of a warning,
Hmm.
letting you know that that something's coming. That way, you can kind of prepare yourself. But with power outages, I mean, you don't see it coming. One minute you have light, then next minute you don't. Sometimes when you have like heavy lightning storms or something like that, or heavy winds, people kind of maybe anticipate that they could lose power, but it may or may not happen. So you may or may not prepare. So, what are the factors that lead to power outages during winter storms?
Well, I think in the case of Dallas, what happened, it was just too much, too much power was being drawn out, and a lot of generators weren't winterized, so they were down and out. And you have a lot of people demanding power, not enough supply. They take power from people, so they have like rolling blackouts
Oh,
in our
wow.
area. Yeah.
Wow, I've seen rolling blackouts. Like, I sometimes for work I'll travel India, and they'll black out where air conditioning shut off for a certain period of time throughout the day. I'm like, holy cow! Hopefully not where I'm at because it's hot. And then I'm from Southern California too, where sometimes in the Inland Empire, temperatures get above 100, so everyone's running their air conditioning. So that puts a heavy tax or a heavy burden on these grids, and so sometimes they'll be like, hey, if we can't control our AC usage on our own, then electric companies or utility companies will be forced to kind of do these blackouts. So they're definitely not fun. But yeah, Texas was a little bit interesting in the sense that I didn't know they have so many different utility companies, and they each have their own different, I don't know, processes and ways of handling these. So, but yeah, definitely I can see that, everyone's starting to, crank up the heat or use
Mhm.
all this electricity, that it just puts a taxation on these, these grids, and then sometimes they just can't handle them, and it leads to these blackouts or these power outages. One of the things that I found rather interesting was that, sometimes when I see power outages, it's maybe a few hours,
Mhm.
maybe a day, but I mean, some of these people were without power for a long time.
Yeah, I had a family member that's out of power for a week. So
Oh, wow.
no power. A couple of coworkers lost power for 3, 4 days. So it really just depended. Seemed like where you lived. If you lived in a affluent part of town, somehow you had power. So unless you know who has some
Right.
power in the city.
I mean, like you can, like we mentioned earlier, you don't really have a chance to prepare for these power outages, but and when they do happen, usually they're pretty short in duration, so that you don't really have to be prepared for them. But
Mhm.
when you have no power for a few days, and you didn't have the chance to prepare, what do you do? I mean, going without heat in the winter's tough.
Yeah,
Um, hopefully you're able to, like, you were a safe haven for people, so hopefully people had friends or families that they could go to. But a few of our instructors for School of PE actually live in the Texas area, and they were like, "Yeah, I mean, even our family and friends were out of power too, so they didn't have that safe haven to go to." Sometimes local hotels, not only maybe they have power, but they're booked.
yeah,
So they can't even take them in. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting thing to kind of watch unfold throughout the Texas area. But yeah, it's rather interesting how these rolling blackouts or these burden on the grids just kind of throw things into chaos.
yeah.
Um, since you lived it, I'll ask you this question: is, you know, what course of action should people take when dealing with power outages? Especially during the winter. What can they do to kind of, I guess, stay the course?
Well, the first thing you shouldn't do is start a fire inside your house. That's rule number one. You don't want to die that way.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
with you.
but the key thing is insulate yourself and your home. So find all the winter jackets. And being from Texas, I don't have many winter jackets, but
Right.
find all the hoodies and long sleeves you can. Stay in the central part of your house. Put any towels underneath your doors for any drafts. So insulate yourself, insulate your home, and if you can, invite a bunch of people over. Make that body heat.
Right, right. It's funny, we kind of were laughing about, hey, when you said, hey, rule number one, don't start a fire in the house. But I mean, it happens.
It
I
happens.
I've read about people, I've even heard about people that they bring in like a charcoal grill,
Yeah,
and then they don't think about, I mean, they think about, oh yeah, it's gonna produce heat, but they don't think about the negatives that are associated with that. So no, I 100% agree with you. Starting a fire, or don't bring in your charcoal grill and use that indoors either. It might sound like a great source of heat, but the ramifications are bad, so you definitely don't want to do that. But you're right, bring people over. Body heat's good, but being in Ohio, if we lose power, we're used to having a lot of heavy coats. We got big winter coats, we got heavy blankets. But in Texas, where you're not used to this cold, you're right, you might not have those winter coats and those heavy blankets. So it definitely makes it a lot more difficult out there for that. So what point, even when you're, in areas where you used to seeing like tornadoes and hurricanes, you see the what is it, the National Weather Service, they send out these warnings, and a lot of times people don't really listen to them until it's usually too late.
mhm.
So at what point should residents kind of heed those warnings, and instead of just saying, hey, they're just another time they're crying wolf, so we'll just ignore it? But when should you be like, well, wait a second, maybe this is something that we should, take to heart?
Well, this was a tough one for me because growing up, we did tornado drills all the
Hmm.
time in school. And then when we actually had a tornado that touched down near our school,
Oh,
nothing.
wow.
We didn't do anything. We just sat in class. We didn't go through our drills we learned. So it's strange how we hear the weather service give us these warnings and we just kind of go, they're dramatic. They're trying to cause riots and get people riled up. But really, we should take them into account and heed their warnings each time because you
N-
never know when that one the lifetime storm is going to hit. And they told you, hey, get ready, something's going to happen, and you're like, no, not this time. And
Yeah.
then you're out in the cold.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And, the school, like I remember, I grew up in Southern California. So we used to do earthquake drills. You
Hmm.
duck, you cover, you get out of under a desk. And I don't know, you do this maybe once a month. And, you're thinking, okay, you're prepared. But you're right. When an earthquake hit, we just kind of didn't do anything that we were taught or
Yeah,
learned. And we just sat there and like, oh, things are shaking.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's interesting how you can go through this preparation, but yet sometimes when it comes time for game time, you don't do what you've been trained to do. So
Mm,
I agree with you. Like take every warning as it's a serious warning. For example, sometimes in our building the fire alarm will go off,
yeah.
and the first time it happened. I'm like, okay, I'll get out of the chair, take the elevator down, or not the elevator, ooh, take the staircase down and
Yeah.
go. But then, we've been in this building probably 5 years, and now every time I hear the fire alarm, I just keep doing my work.
Yeah.
But the one time it's going to happen is going to be a real thing. So, I agree with you. So I think I'll practice what I preach, and I'll start, if I hear the fire alarm, I'll go down the stairs and I'll go to that meeting place instead of thinking, it's just another false alarm.
Hmm.
Because it only takes one time for you to regret not doing what
Yeah.
you're supposed to do. So, um,
Exactly.
when I was looking through the questions for today, one kind of popped out and drew my interest more than the others because I have no clue. I don't know. Yeah, I have no clue what it is because I don't think I've ever heard it or seen it. So, why would residents receive boil water orders?
So there are a few reasons why we would see so. Usually, when there's a pressure drop in the system, that means the water is unsafe or contaminated, and they don't want to put anyone at risk, especially weakened immune systems. So they give you the advice to boil your water for at least 5 minutes. Get all the toxins or
Hmm.
anything that could be in the pipes out of the water, because the water is no longer pressurized.
Oh, that makes sense. So, when I was a kid in California, sometimes water was scarce, meaning sometimes, you go through these droughts or they're going to say, hey, you're going to have to start rationing water. And I'd see my mom filling up the bathtub with water. I'm like, what the heck are you doing? She's like, well, you don't know when they're going to not allow you to use the water. So I guess it's kind of the same thing, but maybe in a different, instead of boiling water, we're filling up tubs so that we have drinking water.
Mm.
But no, the boiling water makes sense. So these, when outages happen, whether they're ones that happen during the winter storms in Texas or sometimes in California during the wildfires, power lines will go down, causing outages. So, who is ultimately responsible or liable for these outages?
Oh, well, listen to the news. No one is apparently. Everyone was just pointing fingers at each other. But ultimately, I think it's the lawmakers and the governor. They appoint the PUC,
Hmm.
Public Utility Commission for Texas, and they manage ERCOT, the electricity managers of the grid in Texas. And they had the right or the authority to winterize the system back in 2010, and they did nothing to that. So they had a chance to prevent the storms from happening, but they didn't take their responsibilities as seriously as they should have.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were kind of joking about, hey, we used to do these tornado drills or earthquake drills in school, and then when they happened, we didn't do anything because you're just used to these warnings, you don't take heed. But with utility companies, I mean, a lot of them, they're warned about either having outdated equipment
Hmm.
or things that need to be retrofitted, brought up to specs. But sometimes they kind of be like, nothing's going to happen, to where if it does occur, it's going to be a massive blackout. But look what happened here. I mean, you're right, some of these things can be prevented. Another thing that kind of made my eyes pop out when I was reading or watching the news about the outages in Texas was like some of the utility bills that these individuals were being dinged with. Holy cow. I mean, I saw bills from, some people were saying they were like $10,000, $12,000. I'm like, holy moly. Because I guess in Texas it's a little different when you have, or than most states, because I guess you have a like a different, I guess you have multiple electric
Deregulated. Yeah. So the
right.
state doesn't run, it's all private companies. And just like the free market, they're not incentivized to produce more energy until the price goes up. And when the price goes up, hey, we're going to make money. So they produce more energy and send the bill to us.
Wow. I mean, I was blown away because, here, I mean, I pay electric bill every month, right? It's usually more or less the same. I mean, depending on if it's really hot in the summer, if it's a really cold winter, it might go up. But at least I kind of know what I'm going to be paying every month. But I guess there's some options where you could pay on demand, I guess, more like
Yeah.
where, when the demand's low, your prices. is low, but then
Yeah.
when it goes up, you go up. But, as a consumer, it's kind of risky. It's like going to Vegas, right? Throwing the dice, seeing what happens. You kind of have expectations where, okay, the demand's low, so I'm going to probably pay this amount. But even when the demand is high, I'm probably thinking I'm only going to pay X dollars. I would have never thought that I'd be paying in the thousands of dollars for, just a few days.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I think I saw one as high as like $17,000. And what happened is I think this, individual, they had, I don't know, maybe they had auto payments set up and their credit card or their debit card was linked. That
Mhm.
money was gone.
Yeah.
Before, at least if you had to pay in the bill, you could maybe be kind of
Fighters.
dispute it.
Yeah.
But just to wake up one day and holy cow, boom, you either see a $17,000 charge on your credit card or you see a $17,000 debit from your account. I don't know. I'm thinking the credit card would have been easier to survive than a direct hit to your checking account of that kind of $17,000. So
Yeah.
wow.
Could you imagine a down payment being taken from your credit card overnight?
Yeah, no kidding, man. That's crazy. So, it's interesting how I learned a lot about the Texas and the utilities, but throughout this ice storm, because I learned about that it was deregulated. I learned that sometimes it's not always to go best with the demand option because yeah, sometimes your cost can be low, but sometimes it could also skyrocket. So holy moly. Um, do you think anything was learned through this by the utility company? And not just them, but also the government.
Do I think? Honestly, no. I feel like we as the public have a short memory, and if this winter isn't as severe as last winter, we'll be like, oh yeah, everything's fine, no worries. But hopefully, this winter isn't as severe. We don't want the same issues again. They're saying it might be,
Right.
but you could hope and pray people have learned their lessons and they change some laws to make it, I don't know, not as the wording, not as incentivized
Mhm,
to the
mhm.
companies to wait until the price goes up to produce more power, or even maybe share electricity with different states. Texas is on its own separate grid, and they don't share with the eastern or western parts of the United States. So it'd be nice
Interesting.
if they could maybe change some laws so they could share with, if we're low on power, we could pull some electricity from a different state or something.
That's interesting. Kind of like how, with California and water, they share
Mm.
water rights with other states. An interesting thing is like usually when I think or if I lose power, I just assume that power is from that grid is gone, right? Meaning like the electric company or something happened or they're just not able to produce enough electricity to meet the demand. But yet here, when you're on this demand type pricing, and I'm paying
Mhm.
$12,000 or whatever it is, it's amazing that I had electricity.
Yeah.
So, it's just kind of funny to kind of think that okay, they had the ability to produce the electricity, but they didn't want to produce enough of it at X dollars. But
Mm.
when it gets to this dollar,
Yeah.
hey, yeah, electricity's flowing.
Yeah.
So, interesting for sure. So, what kind of steps or measures can be taken to kind of avoid this event from happening again in the future?
Well, first they could winterize the power grid. I
And
know.
when you say winterize power grids, what are you referring to, or what does it entail?
Well, it entails that they're able to withstand temperatures below freezing for several days at a time. So I know in El Paso they had an issue where they lost power through a winter storm, but they went through and winterized their portion of
Mm,
their grid. So they haven't had lost electricity since because of the winter storm. But here in the eastern part, where it doesn't get as cold as it does in El Paso, being a desert,
hmm.
we haven't taken that into consideration in our Houston, Dallas, Austin, that area. So when it gets really cold for a long time, which doesn't happen often, but when it does, we pay for it with our grid not being winterized.
Oof, yeah, I can imagine that. As on an individual level, there's a lot of things I guess you can kind of take as precaution. For example, living in Ohio, the weather's cold, so you're used to it. A lot of people might live in more rural areas, so they have to take I don't know, more precautions to ensure that if, a bad storm comes through, their power gets wiped out, they have a backup. So a lot of people have generators, that can either power certain utilities for X number of days or hours or power their entire house. Are generators common in Texas where individuals will have them?
Not not outside of the rural areas. So if you live, pretty much off the grid, you might have you might have a generator, but no, they're not very common at all. But a
Yeah,
few of
no.
my coworkers have went out and bought some because of the.
Oh yeah, I have some friends out here that have done the same thing, and I mean, they got some big puppies, man. I'm like, holy cow, those are some. They power the progressive field for the Indians. Some of these generators. So, um, you know, yeah, it's been an interesting topic. I mean, because natural disasters happen, right? But this was more of a natural disaster timed with some maybe steps that could have been prevented at the human level. But nonetheless, it was devastating to a lot of people. Hopefully, as you guys out there in Texas make it through the winter, that one, you don't have those severe temperatures, and if you do, power is able to stay on. But it's been a great topic. I've had a lot of fun talking about it. So I thought, maybe let's spend a little bit of time, Obi, kind of maybe on some more lighthearted topics. Let the audience try to get to know you a little bit better. So what got you into engineering? Was it something, a path that you knew that, hey, this is what I want to do, I'm going to go be an engineer? Or did you take a path where you thought, man, I'm going to be a doctor or something, or I'm going to be an NFL quarterback, and then here you are as an engineer?
I went to a science engineering in high school, so that kind of helped push
Okay.
me in that general direction. But growing up, I've just been curious about how things work. I watched a documentary on the Big Dig, that project in Boston that was delayed and over budget, and that inspired me to be an engineer.
Very nice. It's funny. It's like a lot of times when people think of budget, they think of either over, or no, when they think of a project, they think of it as over budget, behind schedule.
Yeah.
So, so it's a good compliment, I guess. Um, so, Obi, let's say you went to the local high school. You got invited there for a career day, and a senior of a high school walks up to you and says, "Obi, you know, I'm thinking about going into the engineering field. What should I do to prepare myself for that type of a career?" And what would you respond to
Well, I mean, study hard, stay in school. The key ones there.
him?
But engineering is more just problem solving, really. If you have that mind to, because once you get out of school, the problems they don't have answers. Excuse me. The answers are usually, if we could afford it, we can do it. Who's paying for it? Those are the answers. But we need to find creative solutions that aren't always just spend more money. you know. So have that problem solving, thinking critically, and communication. Engineers aren't known for the communication skills. We're known for being in the back office on the computer designing things, but being communicative to your client,
hmm
to the public, and your engineers will take you a long way.
That's some great advice. Engineering has a lot of wonderful things about it. It's such a broad field where, like, you can do just about anything. I mean, you can be a civil engineer, or maybe you're a mechanical engineer. You got nuclear engineer. So it's nice in the sense that there's so many different paths. So maybe, you're like, I don't really want to be a transportation engineer, but oh, wait a second, I like bridges. I can go be a structural engineer. So there's so many different things that you can do within the engineering field, to where it makes me feel like, when I think about engineering, that maybe every day is different. For example, can you walk us through a typical day for you?
Yeah, every day is different. So, typical day, unfortunately, a lot of meetings. That's
hmm
the life of any engineer. But if I'm not in the meeting, I'm doing a design. I have a project that's about 43 miles in South Texas, and
Wow.
they're upgrading to rural highway to like interstate standards.
hmm
So that's its own task. I have another project where we're building a bridge across a state line. So I'm working with two DOTs, and that's also a very interesting process.
Sure,
every,
sure.
every state does things just a little bit differently. So it's interesting coordinating that process. And then I have
It's
a project
interesting.
in the middle of nowhere, Texas, where we're just kind of like widening a road to from one lane to two lanes. And I mean, everyone there is just real laid back, and there's never a rush on that project.
No,
So
it sounds like you have a lot of different things going on. A variety is nice.
yeah. So
Y-
each day is a little different challenge.
yeah. Texas. I drive through it a lot. I usually, back in the day, I'd go from Ohio to Albuquerque for Christmas. So I'd always drive through Texas. And one thing that always drove me nuts about the state of Texas is that in the night, and maybe it doesn't apply anymore, is at nighttime the speed limit drops back down to 7 to 55. Do they
Hmm.
still do that after the sun sets? The speed limit drops?
I don't believe so anymore. I believe once you get out of urban areas, that
Hmm.
speed limit is just like if you're in West Texas, it's 85.
85. Holy
85.
cow. Maybe I do like Texas. I,
It's flat, so there's no.
right. No, I agree. So I got another question for you. So Texas is home of is it Whataburger?
Yes, Whataburger.
Have you been to Whataburger?
Oh, as a native, yes, of course, you
All
have
right.
to. It's a rite of passage.
So outside of Texas, have you been to like California? Or have you been to New York?
Yeah, yes, I have.
All right. So California is home of In-N-Out. Have
Yes,
you done the In-N-Out?
I have done the in and out.
All right. Now here's $1 million question, Obi, and this is going to determine if you come back or not. In-N-Out or Whataburger?
Ooh, um, interesting. I think Whataburger, just because you have more variety there. You could really customize the burger, make it your own.
All right, I'll go with that response. I'm an In-N-Out guy,
Yeah, yeah,
but
okay.
the answer was good. It wasn't just a, hey, Whataburger's better. It's the variety. So Obi, I will have you back based on that. So also being in Texas, you got a lot of sports teams out there. So when
Yes.
it comes NBA, are you Mavericks, Rockets, or Spurs?
Oh, Mass fan all the way.
Okay, Doncic fan then, right?
Yeah, yes.
All right, very nice. Are you also a Dallas Cowboy fans?
Unfortunately, yes, I am a Cowboys fan.
Yeah,
Tough
that's
life.
gonna hurt our relationship a little bit, Obi.
The tough life. You're Browns or Bengals?
I'm a Browns fan.
Okay.
Um, Ohio, I try not. I'm from LA, so I grew up being a Miami Dolphins fan. Dan Marino was playing when I was a kid, but they haven't been relevant since. So I moved to Ohio in '04, and then I picked up being a Browns fan. So it's rough being a Browns fan. I tell you, test your loyalty. That's for sure. So
Exactly.
um, but hey, Obi, I've had a lot of fun with you today talking about, power outages and things like that. I'd love to have you back. I know we're getting ready to go into the Christmas holiday, so if you want to share with the audience what are your plans for the Christmas holiday? Like, what is on your dinner table come Christmas Day?
Ooh, so I'm Nigerian, so it's a little bit different from the traditional American fare, but we
Okay.
have jollof rice.
Oh,
It's like I know the contemporary to American food would be like Mexican rice,
I like
very
it.
flavorful, very
Hmm.
seasoned rice. We have suya, which is like Nigerian barbecue, more or less. It's seasoned meat on the grill.
Ooh.
And yeah, can't go wrong there. And, just other treats, puff puff,
Okay.
fried dough, a little something sweet to
Oh,
and dinner. So
that sounds excellent. Obi, sounds like you're in for a good meal.
yeah,
But I'd love to have you back on here. We can chat more power. I'm sure there's a lot of other topics in engineering we can get into.
of
For the
course.
rest of you out there, I hope you have a safe and Merry Christmas. And we'll see you again right before the new year. Obi, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast.